is. Krishna is the lover of Radha. He displays many amorous pastimes in the groves of Vrindavan. He is the lover of the cowherd maidens of Raja and the holder of the great hill named Govardhan. He is the beloved son of Mother Yashoda, the delighter of the inhabitants of Raja, and he wanders in the forest along the banks of the river Yamuna. So when we read this translation, it basically transports us directly into Vrindavan. So now we are all, I hope everyone is in the mood of being in Braj, sitting by the banks of the Yamuna and just imagining Krishna's pastimes. So when we transport ourselves over there, the lecture becomes that, it's basically Krishna's words. An incompetent person like me is given the opportunity to sit here and speak to you. So please forgive me for that. But let's just go to Vrindavan and sing this lovely, lovely kirtan. Okay, so it goes like this. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadhari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadhari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadhari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadhari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadhari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadhari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Rama Gaura Premanande. Hari Hari Bol. Namaskar Krishna Pastaya Putale Shrimati Shankar Shata Sadikarti Navine Namo Unika Premamurti Kripat Mane Gaura Desha Vikashata Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. That is a quick prayer asking Krishna to forgive me for sitting over here and trying to speak about it. So, I got a beautiful verse. I got 1.1. Thank you, Ramtulsi Prabhu. So I thought it would be easy, but it is easy. But also it's a fully loaded verse. Absolutely, potatoes with cream cheese and everything on it. Fully loaded. Every single word has meanings that people can go into raptures about. So what I'm going to try to do, because time is a little short and I know everybody, doesn't like to get pushed back on prasadam, I am going to I've taken a few words from this verse and I've expounded on it. Really, really beautiful verse. It sets the tone for the Bhagavad Gita, basically, and we'll see that. So, Dhritarashtra Uvacha Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsavaha Mamaka Pandavaschaiva Kim Kurvata Sanjaya. Prabhuji's.
Dhritarashtra
Uvacha Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsavaha Mamaka Pandavaschaiva Kim Kurvata Sanjaya.
Dhritarashtra Uvacha Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsavaha Mamaka Pandavaschaiva Kurvata Sanjaya.
Mataji's.
Dhritarashtra
Uvacha Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsavaha Mamakas Pandavaschaiva Kim Kurvata Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra Uvacha Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsavaha Mamaka Pandavaschaiva Kim Kurvata Sanjaya. Swati.
Dhritarashtra Uvacha
Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsavaha Mamaka Pandavaschaiva Kim Kurvata Sanjaya. Please forgive me, Shyama Kishori Mataji. Hari Hari. So I will read the translation quickly. Dhritarashtra said, O Sanjaya, after my sons and the sons of Pandu assembled in the place of pilgrimage at Kurukshetra, desiring to fight, what did they do? So simple, right? Such a simple verse. Just a question. He's just asking him. Fully loaded question though. So the way I split this, the purport was pretty long, but I've just taken the gist of the Bhagavad Gita. So I thought 3 paragraphs the Matajis could read and 3 the Prabhujis could read. So let's go. Anybody pick a paragraph and just read from there. Alka.
Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Bhagavad Gita is the widely read theistic science summarized in the Gita Mahatmya, glorification of the Gita. There it says that one should read Bhagavad Gita very scrutinizingly with the help of a person who is a devotee of Shri Krishna and try to understand it without personally motivated interpretations. The example of clear understanding is there in the Bhagavad Gita itself, in the way the teaching is understood by Arjuna, who heard the Gita directly from the Lord.
Thank you.
If someone fortunate enough to understand the Bhagavad Gita in that line of disciplic succession without motivated interpretation, then he surpasses all studies of Vedic wisdom and all scriptures of the world. One will find in the Bhagavad Gita all that is contained in other scriptures, but the reader will also find things which are not to be found elsewhere. That is the specific standard of the Gita. It is the perfect theistic science because it is directly spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna.
So this last sentence, there are a few more paragraphs on the purport, but I didn't add it here. So the last sentence over here, it says, it is the perfect theistic science because it is directly spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna. So the Bhagavad Gita is basically, my favorite book because, we started Bhakti Shastri with it, but also it's one of our classic books that when we take for book distribution, we always take tons and tons of Bhagavad Gita. And then we try and explain it to different kinds of people. So you try and look at that person and say, oh, how can I distribute this Bhagavad Gita to that person? So normally when we go on book distribution, what we do is when we take the Bhagavad Gita, and I strongly suggest all of you should try this at home. If you have a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, just take the Bhagavad Gita and keep it close to your heart. It is such an amazing feeling that you will have thrills running down you. Just keep it close to your heart because Krishna has spoken that book and Krishna lives in your heart and there's that instant connection. So please do that. The other thing about the Bhagavad Gita is, of course, this is verse 1.1. In the Bhagavad Gita itself, the introduction is long, the pages and pages of introduction. And when you have some of the acharyas and some senior devotees, they have 7-day seminars on just the introduction. That's how big and large and beautiful the introduction is. So obviously I can't start this verse without a little bit of the introduction. So the Bhagavad Gita is basically the song of God, right? Bhagavad Gita. It's a song of God. He's speaking it himself. Just imagine that. He's speaking 700 poetic verses. So one other way to think about the Bhagavad Gita, which I really like to picture, is like a little music box, a little carousel. So if you just open this beautiful music box here, this one on the left, and then it opens up, and then of course there's a key at the bottom which you wind. And instead of this little horse, you can just imagine Krishna and Arjuna sitting there on their chariot and going round and round, and Krishna is singing 700 verses. It's such a beautiful feeling when you say that Bhagavad Gita, as complicated as it is to a lot of people, and even for people who read it, every day. We read a paragraph every day, we read a chapter every day. There's magic, because every time you read it, you're going to understand a lot more about it. So when you just think that Krishna is singing this, he's literally poetically singing 700 odd verses, again, it fills your heart. So this is the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita. And then, of course, the Gita Mahatmya, how important it is. The beauty of the Gita is that, Shankaracharya says he compares it to all the Vedic scriptures to a cow. Krishna is the cowherd, milking the cow, and Arjuna is the calf, and the Gita is the milk of the cow, which is, Arjuna then drinks and imbibes all that knowledge. This is written by Shankaracharya, right? And then, of course, we have a lot of Western scholars and Albert Einstein especially who, one is when I read the Bhagavad Gita and reflect about how God created this universe, everything else seems so superfluous. This is at the back of every Bhagavad Gita. I think there are 4 or 5 people's commentaries, including Mahatma Gandhi and Albert Einstein in there. So, what does the Gita do to us, right? It's basically we can do CPR with the Bhagavad Gita, right? So you do the CPR and then you keep reading it. Even if you read like ISKCON of Bergen County, Monday to Friday, we have a 15-minute Bhagavad Gita reading during lunch or whatever. Even if you do that That's all. That's like CPR. It keeps your heart pumping and then gets rid of everything else that is not necessarily needed in this world. Now, a lot of people think Facebook is very important in life, and I agree. So is Instagram. But the Bhagavad Gita also kind of tells you that if you take the Bhagavad Gita and keep it in your heart, that a lot of other things just get pushed out gently. So the Bhagavad Gita is a CPR. Okay, now moving on to verse 1. So verse 1 is basically, it starts with Dhritarashtra Uvacha. Imagine this Vedic book, this book which is supposed to be India's national book, of course. But, this is the essence of all the Vedas that Srila Prabhupada translated. He keeps telling us there are about 800 English translations of the Bhagavad Gita, but my version is as it is. Okay? It may sound very pompous, and people who are not inside of ISKCON may say, oh, what does he think? Why is his Gita so special? But he explains it so nicely. He says, the Gita has been explained by Krishna himself. I don't need to put my little chili pepper and spice on that. I don't need to do that. All I'm doing is translating it to this contemporary world, especially to the American audience that he brought it to in the first place. And he's saying, I'm laying it out to you. That is why I'm calling mine as it is. It's exactly the way Krishna speaks it, right? And then he gives the example of some translations. One particular translation he speaks about where the author has presumed Krishna to be the doctor and Arjuna to be the patient. So the jargon of that particular translation is in medical terms. Can you imagine? That's not how Krishna meant it, right? So he'll give you examples like that. And that is why the Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all Vedic knowledge, Krishna says. So this beautiful book starts with a question, right? There's of the 700 verses, this is one verse that Dhritarashtra speaks, and this is the only verse that he speaks. And he sets the foundation for the Bhagavad Gita. Dhritarashtra Uvacha, Dhritarashtra said, he spoke, he asked, right? So that's how the Bhagavad Gita starts. And when you hear a lot of lectures, they'll say spiritual life begins when you question. When you have questions. Ask questions. Now again, there's a caveat to that. Don't be arrogant when you ask a question. Of course you can be arrogant, but eventually you'll realize that arrogantly asking a question is not going to get you an answer which you are willing to receive. Because that arrogance is like a wall, it'll block the answer that you're trying to receive. So when you ask humbly, like the ISKCON code word of humbly, when you ask nicely, you'll receive an answer, and that answer is not just going to be on the material platform, it'll elevate you to a transcendental platform, without you even realizing it. So that's the beauty of it, right? So question and answers are always encouraged. The Bhagavad Gita is full of question and answers. The Srimad Bhagavatam is full of question and answers. So we encourage you all the time. Nothing is a stupid question. And everyone out here, I'm seeing a couple of new faces, but it looks like every one of you either goes to a Bhakti Vriksha, or you're in association with a devotee who's been around for many years. So never hesitate to ask. Never hesitate. I remember at the beginning when I used to feel a little conscious, and I would never know the mantra to chant before the japa mantra. And I was like, who am I going to ask? It's so embarrassing, right? Because I'm supposed to know it. I'm supposed to be chanting, so I'm supposed to know. But no, don't feel like that. No question is a stupid question. Like look at this so-called silly question that Dhritarashtra asked, right? Sounds like a very silly question. But let's talk about why Dhritarashtra is sitting over here. And this is Dhritarashtra, by the way, the blind king, and this is Sanjaya. So what happens is Vyasadeva, who's also the compiler of all the Vedas, Vyasadeva is related to Dhritarashtra, right? He's their grandfather. So he goes over there. And then, of course, Dhritarashtra has this this slogan. Oh, it's not my fault. I didn't want the war, but I can't see. It's my children. So, he's going on, he's ranting about this all the time. It's like his little whiny little baby cry kind of a thing. I'm blind. What can I do? My children are like that. But it's just hogwash, because that, you'll realize that it's not the truth as you go along. So, Dhritarashtra keeps saying, I don't want the war, but then obviously he wants to know what is happening. So Vyasadeva tells him, I can give you eyesight so that you can watch the war, right? Vyasadeva tells him that. But guess what Dhritarashtra says? He says, oh no, I have not seen my children growing up, so I don't want to see them die. So then Vyasadeva says, okay, then I'll give it to Sanjaya, so Sanjaya can see what's going on and give you the story as to what's going on. Now here, right there, is something that you can hook Dhritarashtra with, right? He's saying right there that he's not seen his children grow up, so he doesn't want to see them die. So you know what's happening out there. And there are a lot of these kind of, what do you say? There are a lot of these kind of clashes, when he's saying something and he's actually doing something or thinking something. And it's blatant to see, blatantly pretending to be something else when it's not. You can see that in this conversation. So then what happens is Sanjaya gets the vision. And now Sanjaya and he are sitting in the palace, and Sanjaya can see what's happening in the battlefield, and he relates the entire scenario to Dhritarashtra. So here what happens is, okay, so some people may say, oh, how is it possible for someone to be sitting so far away and all that great stuff? But anyway, this was 5,000 years ago. It's not magic. But you think about something right now, right? Like let's say we are sitting someplace. We're sitting in a park, right? We're sitting in a park and we're watching our kids play, and we are doing our thing, we're doing our japa and we're chanting. All of a sudden you turn to look at a person and you see that person looking at you. Has that happened to you? You just realize that someone has been looking at you, and naturally your instinct is to turn around and you catch that person looking at you. So there's that kind of a sixth sense or something that's going on. There's a phenomenon which is not fully understood. We instantly turn to say, oh, this person has been looking at me. You know that this person has been looking at you. If that happens in this day and age, so 5,000 years ago, it was absolutely possible for Vyasadeva to give Sanjaya the ability to see the war and to translate it to him. So that's the whole thing behind that. Then, okay, so now, again, coming back to Dhritarashtra's story, right? He's like, he keeps pretending, oh, I didn't want this war, I'm blind. Even when Krishna goes to go and, Krishna tries to pacify him and say, can you try and control the war? And he's like, oh, I can't do it. I can't control my son. He is what he is, or whatever the case is. But the problem, the root cause of the problem is Dhritarashtra when you think about it, right? And we'll come to that slowly. Dhritarashtra, the whole thing is attachment makes us blind. He is so attached to his son. His whole focus is on that. Like, look at this picture right next to that, right? When you have a camera and your entire focus is on that leaf, right? You're focusing your camera on that. But look at how gray everything else is, how out of focus everything else is, right? And that's what's happening here to Dhritarashtra too. But Dhritarashtra, what happened was, when he was born blind. So legally, as per the rules reigning those Maharajas in those days, he could not become king. Okay? There was one thing he could do. He could accept it and say, okay, this is what it is. No. But he kept hankering for that. It was that hankering, the attachment, the greed, the need to want to become king. He kept having that despite the fact that he was born blind. Despite the fact that he had a wife who was willing to stay blind with them so that they could go through life companionably. Despite that, he had that hankering with him. And then he realized that after Pandu died, he realized that his son could most probably become the king. Although, hierarchically, his son could not become king. It had to be Pandu's son. So there again was the attachment to his son. His entire focus was on Duryodhana getting the throne. And in that, everything else went out of focus. Everything else, being nice to Kunti and being nice to the superiors, being nice to Bhishma Dev and Dronacharya, and everything else flew out the window. Courtesy, spirituality, generosity, because he was the ruling king, despite the fact that he was blind. He was the ruling king at that point. And all those kingly qualities disappeared because of his attachment. That one attachment made him so blind. Right? Now, this is without being political at all, right? Just recently, in the month of January, we had this whole thing. This former president was only focused on that one thing, focused on keeping that chair in the White House. And guess what happened? Everything else fell on the wayside. We had an insurrection. We had people who were threatened, who were killed, congressmen everything against the constitution. So this is so real. It just happened to us in our lifetime, just 6 months or 8 months ago. So this is exactly what happened during Duryodhana's time. And as Kali Yuga progresses, this kind of a situation is going to keep continuing. Again, what was the whole thing? It was the attachment. I want to be sitting on the chair in White House. I don't want to give it up, despite what everybody else around me says. Dhritarashtra also he had Vidura, he had Dronacharya, he had a lot of senior advisors around him, but he never caved into any of that, right? And this is just to give you a scenario as to what happens when you're just so attached to one particular thing, you're honed in and you're focused in on that, and you don't want to give it up. Now, don't mistake attachment for, oh, I need to give up everything and then I need to, not be attached to my children and not be attached to my husband and not be attached to my job. Because when you start reading the Bhagavad Gita, you can swing. Immediately you feel, oh, what am I doing in this material world? This thing is all rubbish. I'm going to die and I'm not going to take anything with me. No, that's not how it's meant to be. Krishna is attached to us, right? Krishna lives in our hearts. So can you imagine how attached Krishna is to us? Which means the trait of attachment lives in us. So there's no way we can be unattached. But it's the intensity with which you're being attached and the object of your attachment. That is where the difference is. You must be attached to your children because they're Krishna conscious children. Even if you're not a devotee, you must be attached to your children. You must make sure that you raise them well. You must be attached to your spouse so that the two of you together lead a life together toward Krishna consciousness. You must do that. You must be attached. You must be attached to Krishna, because only when you're attached to Krishna and you develop that love for Krishna, then you start developing detachment for everything else. So when you're attached to your children, you have to raise them in Krishna conscious. So that's the attachment. But the detachment is that these children have been given to me by Krishna. They're Krishna's gift to me. I'm their parent, I'm their mother, right? I'm very attached to my kids. But they are, after all, Krishna's gifts to me. So that's the balance between the attachment and the detachment. Because immediately a lot of people, either when they read the Bhagavad Gita, their first thing is like, main ye nahi kar sakta hu, I need my job. Who's going to take care of my house? Who's going to pay my mortgage and my car insurance if you think I'm just not going to do anything? No, but that's not how you interpret the Bhagavad Gita. You need to be attached and you need to be detached. And that's why when you get a Guru Maharaj, not necessarily if you have a Siksha Guru and a Diksha Guru and you keep coming for Sunday lectures like this, you begin to realize that my home is my temple, my body is my temple, my home is my temple, my children are Krishna's prasadam to me. And that's how you develop attachment and detachment. Okay? Very important, because a lot of people either believe that if you're in Krishna consciousness, then you become you have to give up everything and you have to go to the Himalayas. Krishna himself will say that in chapter 3, that you don't do that, right? So we have to be aware of that. And we have to also let people, they'll say, oh, tum to Hare Krishna ho, yani ki, oh my goodness, I don't want to have anything to deal with you because you're like so boring, you have such a restricted and austere life. Well, we all live normal lives, right? Everybody in this room, I think, has a job. Everybody in this room goes to school or does something or the other. We eat delicious food. So, Okay. So there were 3 kinds of blindness, right, over here. So we had Dhritarashtra, whose blindness is physical. I used it perfectly wherever he got the chance. And sometimes I feel I also use it. Sometimes I'm like, oh no, I have a backache, I can't come. So I'm like, so Dhritarashtra is like, no, I'm blind, I can't do anything about my son. And then Duryodhana's blindness was prejudiced, right? He was so prejudiced. He hated prejudiced, so envious. He hated his cousins. He just felt that the throne belonged to him, despite knowing that the throne did not belong to him. His blindness, he was so prejudiced, he didn't care about anything else. He didn't care about the fact that everyone was going to die. All he wanted was to not allow his cousins to get onto the throne. And Arjuna's situation, Arjuna was circumstantially blind, because by the end of chapter 1, he says, oh my goodness, what am I doing in this war? I'm going to be killing my relatives and there'll be there'll be disruption in family life. So he throws his bow down and he sits on the chariot and he says, Krishna, I will not fight. He says that. So he was blinded circumstantially, based on the circumstance, right? So the three instances. Now what happens to Arjuna is, by the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna's blindness is lifted, right? Because Krishna is talking to him, he listens to Krishna and he takes his advice and he follows Krishna's advice. So Arjuna's blindness is lifted and then he says, okay, now I shall fight, right? He goes ahead and he fights. Do you think the same thing could have happened to Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana? Could their blindness have been lifted?
If they gave up their prejudice or...
Absolutely. Yes. Anybody's blindness can be lifted. If you follow the Gita, and if you follow it with faith, you don't have to follow it with high intelligence, you don't have to follow it with a robotic tendency. If you follow it with faith, your blindness can be lifted. Dhritarashtra's blindness could have been lifted. Duryodhana's blindness could have been lifted. Dhritarashtra could have realized, had he read the Bhagavad Gita, had he listened to his elders who had told him, his blindness could have been lifted. He said, listen, this is what I'm born with. This is what, nature has given me. My own karma has given me this blindness. I have a wonderful wife who's willing to lead her life being blind. I have 100 beautiful, wonderful children. However ugly a child may be, to a crow, the crow's child is the most beautiful. To us, it may be like an ugly little ball of fur. But to any parent, their child is the most beautiful. So Duryodhana could have said that. This is my lot for this lifetime of mine. Let me accept it and let me move away. And he could have done this by reading the Bhagavad Gita or by listening to what Krishna had to say, and there would have been peace, right? His blindness would have been lifted. And Arjuna could have done the same thing. His prejudice would have been lifted when, even logically, if he said, this throne doesn't belong to me. Because logically it does not. And his envy would have come down, because if he listens to Krishna, and Krishna talks about lust, envy and anger being, three of the major demons that can kill us, Arjuna's blindness could also have been lifted. So the same thing goes for us, right? Whatever state of life we are in, whether we are in trouble, whether we are in anything, the Bhagavad Gita is that kind of book. It will inspire us, it will lead us, it will guide us. Guide us to what? Guide us to become the President of America? Guide us to become, the next Jeff Bezos? No. It will guide us to find our own internal peace. That's what everyone is seeking. We're all looking for happiness, right? We're looking, I need to go on vacation here, and I need to do this, and I need to do that, because we are seeking happiness outward. Whereas if we follow the Bhagavad Gita, it's all inside. That happiness is what we will achieve by just following the Bhagavad Gita, reading one line here, reading one line there, listening to many lectures here and there. So any kind of blindness can be lifted if we follow humbly and with faith, right? Imagine all this is this loaded information in just BG 1.1. All this is coming up. Okay. Then the next couple of words is that Dharma Kshetre, Kurukshetre. Right? Now Kurukshetra, of course, a lot of people had done that this plot of land where the war is being held, where the war is being played out. Kurukshetra. Kurukshetra was famous anyways because a lot of people had done austerity, so it was considered religious. Now let's talk about Dharma Kshetre. Kshetra means a piece of land. Kshetra means soil, land, right? And here, so beautifully it's explained that what is the dharma of that Kshetra? First, let me ask you, what is your understanding of dharma? Anybody?
Occupational duties.
Very good. Occupational duties. Mataji, what's your understanding of dharma? Anybody? What's your understanding of dharma? Karma.
To follow humanity.
Huh?
To follow humanity.
To follow humanity? Nice. So see, dharma has a lot of connotations for a lot of different people, right? And this, Srila Prabhupada explains it lucidly like water. Dharma is the constitutional nature of any entity. Right? So let's say the dharma of sugar. What is the dharma of sugar? Sweetness. Because it is the inherent nature, inherent quality of sugar. If you take away sweetness from sugar, it just becomes white powder. Do you call it sugar then? No. Dharma of salt is its saltiness. You take off the saltiness, it's just white powder again. So the dharma of a kshetra, of a piece of land, is to make sure that it holds the plants and the trees and the grains that grow in it. That's the dharma of the soil. Nurtures it, nature, feeds it. Because the nutrients are in the soil. Of course, now with the farming the way it is, it's all different. But that's the dharma, inherent nature of soil. So now let me ask you, what is the dharma of us? What is our dharma as a human being?
To do the right thing.
Very good. Very good. To do the right thing. Right? Prabhupada also explains our dharma, our constitutional nature, because we are big parts and parcels of Krishna, right? We are this tiny, tiny soul. Our dharma is to serve. We are servants. Nobody likes to use the word servant. Nobody likes it. But we are servitors. Now we can decide if we want to serve the government of America by creating this huge business and paying a lot of taxes. We can decide if we want to serve the US Army by serving this country. Or we can decide that we want to serve these beautiful deities. One way or the other, we are servitors. Either we are serving our spouses, we are serving our children. Whichever country you go to, if you're in India, you have to drive on this side of the road. If you're here in America, you have to drive on this side of the road. You're following rules. You're serving somebody or the other. You're paying taxes some way or the other. And then you have people who are like, I don't need to serve anybody. I'm very happy by myself. No, you are serving your senses. Because the minute your eye sees something, you're running after that to procure that. The minute you see some food, your tongue is being attracted to that and you need to feed your senses. So one way or the other, we are servitors of something or the other. Then it's for us to decide, do we want to be servitors to Krishna, who is going to love us immensely and double that back, or we want to be servitors to all these odd objects that we catch a fancy to. Right? So now here in this place, Dharma Kshetre, the kshetra, the place where they're having the battlefield, is it's to nurture the soil. So what happens is in a rice paddy, when you have this, they're growing the rice and they're weeding out everything else. Anything that looks like grass is being weeded out. So again in verse 1.1, the minute Dhritarashtra says, Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre. So the minute he's used the word Dharma Kshetre, he already knows that his children are adharmic. So there's that fear factor again. He knows his children are adharmic. So he uses the word Dharma Kshetre. And that's why he asks Sanjaya. Because he has this fear that his kids are going to be weeded out and thrown and be killed in the battlefield. So you see that? Every sentence in that, every word or phrase or whatever in his first question is loaded. So this is what he's asking there, Dhritarashtra. Then the other question that usually comes up is, why is the Bhagavad Gita set in a battlefield? Because, Krishna could have said all these wonderful things someplace else, some nirvana garden, there could have been waterfalls and there could have been peacocks and stuff like that. Why does he have to have this whole thing in the battlefield? Again, this question comes up a lot when we do book distribution. Why is it in the battlefield? I'm a very peaceful person. I don't believe in wars. This Bhagavad Gita, it's too warmongering. Some silly comments, for whatever reasons. So, the acharyas say that within each of us, okay, think about it, within each of us, we have a base trait and we have a higher trait. Within each of us, there's a little bit of the Pandavas and there's a little bit of the Kauravas. Always. And there's always a struggle. For some people, it's not that much of a struggle. For other people, they don't care at all. A thief is a thief. He doesn't care about listening. his higher conscience. So this is the reason that it was set in the battlefield, to show us that, of course, Arjuna is in a situation where he has to kill his relatives. But all of us go through a battlefield, and when we remember Krishna during that situation, a simple thing, right? A simple thing. You go grocery shopping, and after you finish grocery shopping, you've taken all your stuff and you've come, and you realize that the cashier has given you $20 extra. Right in there's a struggle. Should I go back and give the $20? ShopRite always charges me and rips me off. I think it's time for ShopRite to pay me back my $20. Simple things like that, right? So within all of us, there is a Pandava and there is a Kaurava, right? And that's why the whole Bhagavad Gita was set in this battlefield. So, Mamakas Pandava Chaiva. This is the next phrase in his question. Mamaka Pandavas Chaiva. So look what he's doing over here. This is a picture of Kunti and her sons after she became a widow and she had to go to her brother-in-law's part. Mamaka, what is he saying? Mamaka, my son, my party, and Pandavas, Pandu's sons. Again, such a blatant giveaway. There are two things. One, of course, makes him generic. He's a king, so he has to be compassionate and, he has to make sure that everyone is under his fold and taken care of very well. But secondly, this is family. Even if you were not king, your son's widowed wife, your brother's widowed wife and children have come to you to take shelter of you, right? To take shelter of you. And at that time, when they came into the family, they were all supposed to be treated equally. And he also claimed at that time, I'm going to treat, the Pandavas and the Kauravas the same. They had the same teacher, Bhishma Dev was the grandparent for all of them. So the scenario was that they were all going to be treated equally. But in one small little phrase, Dhritarashtra gives up the secret. Mamaka Pandavas Chaiva. Because he never ever believed that the Pandavas were his children. He wouldn't have said a sentence like that. He wouldn't have said, my son and Pandu's sons. So again, this is a dead giveaway. That he never ever wanted peace between Pandu's sons and his sons. He never ever wanted Pandu's sons to take over the throne. He was only honed in on getting Duryodhana on the throne. Okay, another giveaway. Now, when he keeps coming back and he keeps whining and he says that, I'm blind and I don't know and all that. Some simple things, right? Most of us are parents. Some of us are not. A lot of us are. Do you not realize that our kids are watching us? Do you not see sometimes, ye to bilkul uski maa ke jaise hai, and we are like dead giveaway. It's not because she looks like you, it's because she speaks like you. She behaves like you. And then eventually, you kind of look like that. So, these are all these pictures when you yell at a kid, the kid picks up your body language. Whatever you've yelled at the bus driver or something like that, your kid picks that up and they think it's okay to do that with someone else. It's okay to yell at someone else, right? So, are we surprised that Duryodhana turned out to be the way he is? No, we are not, because eventually it all rolls up to Dhritarashtra, who never ever adjusted to the fact that the throne did not belong to him at all. Whether he allowed Duryodhana, whether he mentioned it to Duryodhana, it was in his body language, and Duryodhana picked that up from him, and he felt that the throne rightfully belonged to him. So you see, here again, all the whining that Dhritarashtra had, I'm blind and I can't see and I can't control my children. You can see right over here that the son is getting it from the father. They say apples don't fall far from the tree, but sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. So anyway, then it says, Kim Akurvata Sanjaya. What did they do, O Sanjaya? What did they do? Now think about this. When you go to a restaurant and there are a bunch of people sitting over there, obviously they've gone to a restaurant to order food and eat, right? So when you ask them the question, what did you do at a restaurant? It's like, oh my goodness, was this person expecting a bomb to explode in the restaurant? Is that why he's asking me this strange question? Right? Dhritarashtra knows fully well that there's a huge battle that's going to happen between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, and he knows fully well that they've met at Kurukshetra for the battle. Yet he asks a question, what did they do? Because again, he knows what is the bomb that is going to explode over there? The bomb of dharma, the bomb of righteousness is what is going to explode over there. That's why he asked the question, because he's not fully convinced that his sons are going to win the battle. So you see, every little thing that he says is a giveaway. That he keeps saying that I couldn't control my son, but you don't believe him, because he could have very well, as king, he could have trained his son to be a better human being, to be a better king, or to be anything like that. So that's one aspect of it. And the second thing is, although he gave them encouragement to go and fight on the battlefield, deep down he knows that they are going to lose. It's just giveaway. He's just giving it away with all these small little phrases that he's saying. Right? This is the whole setting of our wonderful, wonderful BG 1.1. And then what happens is, when after all this, right now, and then, so he says, Kim Akurvata, what did they do? Right? This is what he asked Sanjaya. And then at the end of the whole thing, what happens is, thus I have, is this one? No. So this is what happens. Sanjaya tells him, so this is the beginning of chapter 1, right? 1.1, where he asks Sanjaya, what did they do, Sanjaya? And then we go through 18 beautiful, beautiful chapters of Krishna explaining what is happening. And then finally Sanjaya says, Yatra Yogeshwaro Krishna, Yatra Partho Dhanurdhara, Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhuti, Dhruva Nitirmati Mama. What else can you expect? Wherever there is Krishna, the master of all mystics, and wherever there is Arjuna, the supreme archer, there will also certainly be opulence, victory, extraordinary power, and morality. That is my opinion. So you see how beautifully the Bhagavad Gita starts with 1.1? What did they do? And then it comes all the way down to 1878, and it says that wherever there is Krishna and Arjuna, after listening to 698 verses or whatever, we didn't need to even go through all that. I mean, for us, of course, we need to. But Dhritarashtra didn't need to go through all that. He asked the question, and he could have just jumped to 18.78, and Sanjaya could have told him that wherever there is Krishna and Arjuna, there is going to be opulence, there is going to be power, there's going to be morality. You see the beauty of this? It's so beautifully written. But again, what Krishna says again is that he says, thus in 1863, before Sanjaya says that, after Krishna has explained everything to Arjuna, right? He doesn't just shove it down Arjuna's throat and say, follow my instructions. No, he says, I have explained everything. You do as you will. The final choice is yours. And this is the one point of independence that Krishna has given us, right? You love me out of your own free will. I don't want to force you to love me. This is what he says. After going through the entire Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, you do as you will. Right? And then Krishna says, oh, where did that slide go? That's gone. So anyway, so Arjuna says, yes, absolutely. Now that you have explained it so well to me, and now that I understand what is going on, I will do exactly as you say. Now, why is he doing that again? Why is he just going to follow Krishna because he's decided that he wants to be a fanatic, and then because that's the right way to do? No, because he understands it and he chooses, he makes the choice. He puts his faith in Krishna and he makes the choice to follow Krishna. It has to be a choice that we make and then we decide to follow, right? Which easily Dhritarashtra could have done and Duryodhana could have done. And despite the fact that they saw the Virat Roop and they saw many different forms of Krishna, they decided not to follow his faith. So, coming back to this one, wherever there is Yatra Yogeshwaro Krishna, Yatra Partho Dhanurdhara, Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhuti, Dhruva Nitir Matir Mama. Wherever there is Krishna, wherever there is Krishna. Where Krishna is here, Krishna is in our homes, Krishna is in our hearts, wherever there is Krishna. But does it mean Krishna is everywhere, right? Does it mean that wherever there is Krishna, that place is opulent? No, because we have to recognize it. It's up to us to recognize it, it's up to us to acknowledge it, and it's up to us then to clean the deities and wash them and feed them, and that's when all the opulence starts. And you don't have to do much. You can take a flower, a fruit, a leaf, and you can offer it to Krishna. That's opulence right there. Because there's Krishna, and you, Arjuna, has created this whole thing for us. We can follow on the footsteps of Arjuna and be a devotee and question Krishna and talk to him and love him. That's all that he's asking for. So, BG 1.1, it just starts with, this Dhritarashtra who already knows that the war is going to be lost, who had many choices to not allow the war to happen. And then it ends with Arjuna and Krishna, wherever they are, there's going to be glory and opulence and mysticism. Okay, so that was for BG 1.1, a fully loaded verse. Please let me know if you have any questions. Yes, Prabhuji.
Next class, Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances.
Thank you, Mataji. Please accept my humble obeisances. Seeing you after so long.
Thank you, Prabhu.
So it is a blissful event. On this, at one point you said that Dhritarashtra was never looking for peace, and he had that evilness in his character, which got translated into, or rather, Duryodhana got it from him. So, question is on that. Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana got it, but we also hear that people bring their own karmas and all that. So, now on the contrary, there is Prahlad Maharaj. He was the son of a big demon, so but he did not get contaminated. So how do we reconcile these two things?
Thank you, Prabhu. Very nice question. So the thing is, you're absolutely right. Everyone brings their own karma, right? But so your karma determines what body you're going to be born in, and it determines, it's predestined for some things like, okay, I'm going to be born in this body, in this family, and some things are predetermined. A lot of your things that are going to happen to you, whether you're going to be poor or maimed, and many things. But there are choices that we make, right? Duryodhana could have also made a choice. Duryodhana had Vidura, who used to live there. Duryodhana had Dronacharya, he had Bhishma Dev. He was also exposed to all of them. He could have made a choice. Just like Prahlad Maharaj did, he made a choice. But the other thing is, it's not, so when I said that Duryodhana got it from Dhritarashtra, they're both very individualistic people. But every time Dhritarashtra used to whine and say, oh, I'm blind, I don't know what my son is doing. That is a false statement. Your son is watching you. He's watching the fact that you've never been able to reconcile, that you could never become king. He's watching your own frustration build up. And he's watching you not correct him. When Duryodhana thought the throne rightfully belonged to him, Dhritarashtra could have corrected him. He never corrected him. So that's another place where he gets it from. But you're absolutely right. It doesn't mean that if the father is like that, the son is like that. If the father is a doctor, the chances for the child to become a doctor are very high. But the child doesn't necessarily become a doctor. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Prabhuji.
Thank you for the nice class. Simply, not being funny, but there shouldn't be 18.79 as far as Dhritarashtra's response to his answer. That's what would it be his response to? Is there any mention?
Okay, actually, that's a great question. So what happens is, here's what happens, right? After all his sons are killed and everything is, devastated, and it's basically Yudhishthira is put on the throne and things like that. Dhritarashtra is so bound materially, he still continues to live under Yudhishthira. Okay, he is so blinded with living in his opulence and being the so-called king and getting respects from this one and that one and everything. He has no shame, basically, that he's still living under Yudhishthira and then living off, and basically, he's the king despite the fact that Duryodhana's son Duryodhana created all the devastation. He's shameless. Until such time that Vidura goes to him and explains to him. Vidura tells him, what are you doing? Your son is the one, and between you and your son, you've created this havoc. And you have absolutely no sense of honor that you're living under the diksha of Yudhishthir, that's when he tells him that you need to pack your bags and you need to go to the forest and finish off the rest of your life over there. And that's when Dhritarashtra, and he goes by himself, and of course Gandhari follows him. He goes away quietly in the morning without even saying goodbye to anybody. So to answer your question, and again, this is just my thought, reflection on this. It may be that he must have been so shameless, and he must have been, yeah, okay, great, I knew this was going to happen. Arjuna had Krishna on his side, so they're going to win. So then what else is there to say, Because he was quite so shameless about the whole thing. But also, in one sense, I wouldn't want to read a last paragraph from Dhritarashtra. I mean, I wanted it to end like this glorious, Why would I would not want to hear what Dhritarashtra had to say at the end? Yes, Prabhuji.
You mentioned that it was BG 1 and then directly on 18. But did Sanjay and Dhritarashtra listen to all the Bhagavad Gita?
Yeah.
So they listened, right? So, but still they did not understand it the way Arjuna understood it.
Exactly. This is what they're saying, that his blindness could have been lifted. He had physical blindness, but he also had a mental blindness, you see. He kept thinking that the throne belonged to him and his sons. That could have been lifted. He could have, accepted the fact, okay, I'm born like this. This is my lot for this life. Let me be happy. I'm anyways going to live in this opulent palace, and I'm anyways going to be treated with respect. But he didn't. He had his eye only on that throne. That hankering was there all the time. So Sanjaya explained the whole thing to him. The entire thing was translated to Dhritarashtra. Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hari Hari.
So I know you said that, Dhritarashtra focused only on the throne, right? So that's why, that was his focus. But then Arjuna also focused. And even when he was growing up, he was, he was very focused individual as well. So what would you say about the kind of focus?
So, again, a wonderful question. Dhritarashtra's focus on the throne was focusing on something that didn't belong to him, right? Logically, as per the hierarchy that they had, the throne wasn't meant for him. Arjuna's focus, there are two things. One is a beautiful, beautiful story about Arjuna focusing on the eye of the fish and hitting that. So that's one thing. But Arjuna's focus on the throne was again to make sure that it came to the rightful person. Arjuna didn't want to become the king himself. He was going to put Yudhishthira on the throne anyways. And the other thing was, as Kshatriyas, he didn't want to become the king of Hastinapur. He even told Duryodhana, he said, give us 5 small villages. Because as Kshatriyas, we are occupational. Now, when you say Kshatriya, again, it doesn't mean that, it's the caste system. No. Kshatriya means occupationally, I'm an administrator. I'm a warrior occupationally. It's my tendency to help people, to administer to people. So he said, give me 5 small villages. But when that didn't happen, then eventually his focus was, now I need to, and even when they were on the battlefield, right, he put his weapon down, he put his bow down, and he said, I don't want to fight. And then it was Krishna who brought him back and said, no, your focus is that you need to get Yudhishthira back to where he rightfully belongs, and as a Kshatriya, this is what you need to do. So again, you brought up a very good point, So focus is really important. Now, focus to the level of fanaticism can hurt us, but focus to the point of I need to do this and I don't want any extraneous disturbances around me is again different. When you focus and you're fanatical about it, that is going to cause a lot of trouble then. But focus is absolutely, you absolutely need focus to do anything. You need focus to chant. Japa is the biggest thing. If we don't focus on the sound vibration and we don't focus on the sound going into our ear, that's a problem. So focus is very important, but placed in the right object. Placed on the right object.
मैं एक हिंदी में क्वेश्चन
हाँ पूछिए बिल्कुल.
मेरे को ये है कि धृतराष्ट्र को पता था कि कृष्णा इज ऑन अदर साइड, so then you are saying that अंदर से उसको डर था कि भाई मेरा दुर्योधन he will lose the war. Then why he didn't tell to the son that you choose the Krishna rather than the other people?
ब्लाइंडेड ना तो उनकी, पहले तो उनकी ठीक है उनकी आंखें नहीं देखती थी, बट वो एक्सक्यूज लेते थे हमेशा कि मेरी आंखें नहीं हैं, लेकिन उनका दिमाग भी अंधा था। दिमाग से तो सोच सकते थे ना कि जो मेरा बेटा कर रहा है, जो द्रौपदी के साथ किया उसने, उसके लिए तो आंखें की ज़रूरत नहीं थी, उसके लिए दिमाग की ज़रूरत थी। वो भी उसी में भी वो अंधे थे। तो उनका जो हैंकरिंग था कि मैं नहीं बन सका राजा, मेरे बेटे को बनना चाहिए, वो जो हमेशा उनके दिल में था, वो साफ नहीं, दिल अपना साफ नहीं कर सके। वही हैंकरिंग लेके उन्होंने सोचा नहीं मेरा बेटा जाएगा, क्योंकि इसमें क्या हुआ कि उनके साइड में भीष्मदेव थे, द्रोणाचार्य थे, बहुत बड़े बड़े वॉरियर्स थे उनके साइड में, और कृष्णा तो भगवान नहीं थे ना उनके लिए। दे जस्ट थॉट कृष्णा ओके वंडरफुल, ही इज अ वंडरफुल आर्चर और व्हाटएवर।
दैट मींस उनको डाउट था कि मे बी दुर्योधन विल विन।
हाँ बिल्कुल, Duryodhan himself also thought that he was going to win, because in the first chapter, बाद में अब जैसे verses जाएंगे, first chapter में दुर्योधन जाके भीष्मदेव से कहते हैं, द्रोणाचार्य से कहते हैं कि हमारे पास इतने बड़े बड़े वॉरियर्स हैं, हम ज़रूर विन करेंगे। आप सिर्फ देखना कि यू आर नॉट पार्शियल टू द पांडवास, यानी कि आप उनकी तरफ ज़्यादा ध्यान नहीं देना, क्योंकि उन दुर्योधन को पता था कि द्रोणाचार्य और भीष्मदेव पांडव से प्यार करते थे। तो उन्होंने कहा कि आपको यू मस्ट रिमेंबर योर क्षत्रिय ड्यूटी, कि आप मेरी तरफ से लड़ रहे हो तो आपको पूरी तरह से लड़ना चाहिए, पूरी कॉन्शियसनेस से लड़ना चाहिए। They were all, of course, they were hoping to win. Except Bhishmadev and Dronacharya, उनको तो पता ही था that they were not going to win, but dutifully उनको कौरवास के साइड से लड़ना था। उन दोनों को पता था कि जिस साइड जहाँ पे कृष्ण है वहीं पे जीत होगी, लेकिन उसके बावजूद वो इस साइड से लड़ रहे थे। यस,
just wanted to pick on the last point that you said. तो अधर्मी हो गए क्या जो भीष्म पितामह? Even after, so in other words, he was loyal to the throne because he was bounded to the throne, but then he chose to a path of loyalty over to the doing the right thing. But Krishna was right, we all understand, right? So at the end of the day, should he not say, no, loyalty to the throne is less important than doing the right thing, be on the dharma side?
So let me understand your question. Are you saying Bhishma Dev, I don't know,
Bhishma Pitama was the right person with the right sort of mind. He always used to explain, Yudhishthira, don't do this, not Dhritarashtra, don't do this, it's wrong. But he chose not to listen because he chose to, he's the king. But at the same time, he also was very fond of Krishna and Pandavas.
Sorry, Bhishma Dev.
Yeah. And he also knew that they were on the right side. But then at the end of it, he chose to be loyal to the throne and fight with Kauravas and not with Pandavas. He could have sided with them.
Loaded questions, okay? I don't know, your prasadam is just getting pushed back. I can tell you that. So, it's a wonderful question. So what's happening here is that Bhishma Dev is a very special personality. He's also called one of the Mahajans. There are 12 Mahajans, okay? Bhishma Dev is a very special personality. Bhishma Dev is an absolute devotee of Krishna. But Bhishma Dev is also playing a role over there. His dharma is telling him that I have eaten the food that the Kauravas have served me. I have lived in this house. Namak khaya maine un logon ka. So I have to fight by their side. So it's not a question of, because then what happens is on the 15th day when he's lying on the bed of arrows, he only expounds and glorifies Krishna after that. So fully knowing that he was on the wrong, but dharmically he had to do what his dharma said. He had to only fight on the Kaurava side. He could not fight on Arjuna's side. Because he was raised, like you said, namak khaya hai, whatever the case is. I mean, it sounds very base when I say that, but he has lived in the Kuru dynasty. That's the Kuru dynasty, and he has to fight against that. The same thing with Dronacharya. Dronacharya was supposed to be teacher for both of them, but Dronacharya was hired by Dhritarashtra. So he fell under that lineage of Duryodhana, and he had to fight on their side. So they could have chosen and they could have said, no, I'm going to do this or not. But the dharmic values are very important at that time. They're like, this is my occupational thing. And what happens with these great people is that they have to set examples. Like a Bhishma Dev will set an example. We follow Bhishma Dev. His dharmic values. We follow Dronacharya. The Dronacharya knew very well that Drupada's son was going to kill him, right, in the war. But yet, when Drupada's son came to him to train, Dronacharya trained him. Because he said, I'm a teacher. I know 100% that this kid is going to kill me when he grows up. But as a teacher, my dharma is not to say no to a student. I am going to absolutely train him. And he trained him to his full knowledge, knowing fully well that that kid was going to kill him on the battlefield. So these dharmic values they teach us very beautifully. Does that answer your question, right? Yes, Mataji.
I want to ask, so what I'm understanding is how much dharma is in your control? So how much of dharma is in your control? So in one case, you're saying that, you're given a body, you're in a family, that's all based on your karmas and what's in destiny, or you're destined to. So dharma is kind of part of that equation. So if you're been put into a butcher's family, your dharma and occupation becomes, in that case, so how much of it is, first of all, within your control? And second question is, and how do you know what is right dharma versus what's not right? Because you're grown up in that particular occupation, so you think that's right.
Right. Absolutely. You're born in a butcher's family, you're like, why? What is wrong with eating meat? This supplied me with livelihood. But to answer the first question, right? The first question is a very important question. So, a lot of times we just throw up our hands at the end. We say, I'm sorry, this is my life, I'm stuck with it, and I'm not going to do anything about it. Anyway, Krishna is the controller, so why should I even bother changing my lifestyle or whatever? But in reality, some very senior devotees give the example that the body that we are born with, the parents that we are born to, the country, religion, or whatever, that is predetermined. But our actions are our free will. The Bhagavad Gita talks about 5 things, right? It talks about Paramatma, Krishna. It talks about Jiva, which is us, individual soul. It talks about Prakriti, which is nature. It talks about Kala, which is time. Okay, these 4 things we have no control over. We don't know, we have to just understand Paramatma and appreciate that. We have to understand who we are as Jivas. We can't change ourselves and say, I don't want to be a part of Krishna, I want to be a part of Jesus Christ. No, that doesn't exist, because as per the Bhagavad Gita, they're all parts and parcels of Krishna. You can't change that. You can't change Prakriti. What is Prakriti? Material nature. You can't change the sun, you can't change the moon, you can't change the way the soil develops plants. You can't change that. You can't change Kala, time. Has anybody even tried doing that? You can't change Kala. These are the 4 very important things that the Bhagavad Gita talks about. The 5th thing that Krishna spends a lot of time talking about, which is the first 6 chapters, is karma. That is the only thing that we can change. Our action that we do today is the only thing we have full control over. Now again, you can tell me, how do I have control over? I'm born in a butcher's family and this is what I'm training to be. So yes, you're born in a butcher's family, but you have full consciousness of whether you also want to go ahead and follow in your father's footsteps. Or if you're born to a doctor, you want to become a doctor, you want to become a lawyer, a teacher, or you want to become a butcher. That choice is fully yours. Karma is the one thing that we have fully in our control. Karma, the free will to decide whether we want to love Krishna, or the free will whether we turn our backs to Krishna. One way or the other, we are under the control of Krishna. One way or the other. Either we face him and we acknowledge it and we appreciate it, or we turn our backs and then we allow material nature to control us. It is. You turn our backs to Krishna doesn't mean that Krishna is out of your life. No, Krishna's fantastic administrator, Prakriti, Mother Durga, she was sitting over there. She's a fantastic administrator. She keeps account of every single action versus inaction. She keeps account fully of that. So now you're fully under the hands of karma. It's totally in that. But if you turn your head to Krishna and say, Krishna, I'm eating this prasadam. Now you washed away the sin of killing that plant and cooking it and eating it. Whereas on the other side, if you've just eaten plain food, even if it's vegetarian food, there is stuff built into it. There's karma built into it. We think we don't kill any animals, right? Because we are so whatever. You walk in the park, you've killed bugs. You've done it already. Now, does that mean that because you're doing it unknowingly, there's no reaction to it? No. Like I said, she is a fantastic administrator. She's holding that post for ages. She's keeping account of how many bugs you've killed, and that'll come back. So how do you wash that now? By chanting, by doing transcendental services. The only person who can wash away your karma or dilute it or change it is Krishna and you. You decide on doing that. So yes, a lot of things are not in our control, but a lot of things are also in our control. The other thing is, now the guy who was born in a butcher's family, right? He's born in the butcher's family, now he's stuck. That is why we do Sankirtan. Because when we do Sankirtan and we're walking down the road and we're saying Hare Krishna loudly and we're offering prasadam, that butcher comes out and says, what the hell is going on the street? And guess what? Magically the word Hare Krishna has gone into his ears. So by the causeless mercy of devotees, that beautiful chanting, that cookie or that lollipop that we've been distributing has now gone to that butcher's child, who maybe not in this life, maybe in the next life is going to go on a new path. Right? Then how do you think we came over here? I especially. Someone has been causelessly merciful that I'm even sitting over here. I've done no good deeds to even presume that I can sit here and talk. Someone has been so causelessly merciful that they've said, okay, let's give this poor loser the name of Krishna. That's how it is. I went to ISKCON looking for Hindi classes for my children. That's all. That's how it happened. I was so lucky. So that's what we have to do. We have to spread it too. Anything you do, you take a prasadam, you go to work, take 6 apples with you. Everything that is offered, your co-worker comes and picks an apple. Boom, there you go. You've already planted a seed in that person by giving them prasadam. Right? Small things like that. You don't have to be a book distributor. You don't have to be afraid and say, oh, I can't talk to people. Simple, subtle, beautiful things will help us spread it. Because we must remember that that's exactly how we came to Krishna consciousness. If you're all sitting here eating this delicious prasadam made by these wonderful Prabhus, it's because someone was merciful to us. Hari Bol. Thank you.